Okay, so you guys all know what gentrification is, I'm assuming.
Oh, yay, the wonderful buzzword.
Can you remind me?
Gentrification is on the rise in Boston. A city of education and opportunity, it has found a home for young professionals from all over the world. But at what cost? We tasked ourselves with studying how a culturally homogenous demographic in a neighborhood affects how it fights gentrification. And we decided to look at 3 neighborhoods. Today, Chinatown fights gentrification from adjacent neighborhoods as a cultural stronghold for Asian Americans. Allston Brighton continues to experience gentrification at the hands of university students, as it has for decades. Roxbury and neighboring areas face gentrification as low-income and diverse communities. We interviewed young professionals, community development workers, and residents from all 3 of these neighborhoods. These are their stories.
My name's Eric Chan. I am a sophomore at BLS. I've been living in Chinatown for my whole life, which is 15 years.
My name is Alex Chen. I'm also a sophomore from BLS. I've been living in Chinatown ever since I came from China, which was 9 years ago.
My name is Alicia Yu. I am also a sophomore at BLS. Although I don't live in Chinatown anymore, I lived there for 2 years and then had to move out. I lived in a project in Chinatown. For projects, there's like a wait list. Waitlists for Chinatown projects are like super long. A lot of people started to immigrate from China, like our family. So then we just needed to find like a bigger place, and also our family income started to increase. So then since more people were starting to immigrate, we wouldn't match how much money you make in order to live there, so we had to move out, which is a good thing, so other people could live there.
I didn't even know that was called Chinatown at first. I just moved there because my parents came. And like when I first moved here, I didn't want to go out. I just want to stay home.
I've lived there my whole life, so I know a lot of people in Chinatown, but like, if I just moved there, I feel like I would be scared to even just walk out, even like during the day, because you know, it's just so scary. You got people smoking. It's like very dirty too. There's a Y in Chinatown, and that's a place that a lot of people go to, you know, work out, talk to friends, because there aren't really any other places that people can go to other than restaurants, but you have to pay money. So that's where a lot of the kids, you know, play around and stuff. That's where I feel safe.
Chinatown was like a safe place, even though it didn't seem that much since there were like hobos everywhere and stuff like that. But like, because I was with my family and always had good experiences in Chinatown, I always like associated it with like a good memory and like a nice place to be.
I feel like it's part of Chinese culture where you just don't go to people, but you know, like that's not like part of the...
True.
It's like pride.
Yeah, it's not part of like the neighborhood structure, but it's just culture.
Over the course of just like being integrated into Chinatown, I've just found enough friends from varying ages that I can just like rely on them.
I got a lot of relatives in Chinatown, so like we live like 10 or 15 minutes away. So
People who live in Chinatown, they have really busy lives.
Yeah.
So sometimes they just don't have time to go to these organizations and seek help.
Even if like organizations like host workshops, nobody's actually gonna go to the workshops because nobody got time for that. They could be like doing like laundry at home or something like that. For adults, I only think what they can do is just recognize that it's happening and not support businesses like it. The raising awareness is already like is basically how much we can do, and especially because that's the way how I learned what gentrification was because someone older than me taught me what it was. I have to serve that role and teach others what it is as well. And I think that's the only way that us teens can actually help with gentrification.
So I think it's up to our generation just to spread awareness, especially to communities that aren't in Chinatown, because if it's Chinatown itself, it's definitely not gonna work. So maybe make like organizations bigger than what they are, like ACDC.
I don't think anything like that we're doing that's this strong would be as strong if we weren't a cohesive community. Looking at a map, you can see from the past 8 years from the census that it went from like 90% to like 40% Asians in the community. And since those people are moving out, there's also spreading awareness with them because of word of mouth.
it's like almost my homeland, but like just a smaller version.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, I've been living here my whole life. I care about my people. You know, like my family has a lot of friends living in Chinatown. Like, I mean, I want to also spread my culture to other people too.
It's recognizing that like people and corporations are coming into Chinatown and not recognizing that they are taking a business opportunity to do something that is basically unethical and just destroying a community. And the reason why it's like so important to me is because it's made a place for people in China who want more opportunity to come to America. And that's like the safety spot where people can come and live there for a little while before moving out, but still looking back and seeing like they can have a safe place to come back to when they're doing that as well. And also, just like Chinatown in general, it's been able to reinforce my Asian American identity. And if it didn't exist, I don't think I would be able to understand my entire background.
I'm Kevin. I went to Northeastern University. I lived in university housing for 2 years, and then I lived in Mission Hill for 2 years.
Regardless of how difficult it might be to actually find a residence in the neighborhood, you decided that you wanted to live in Mission Hill, like, pretty easily?
Yeah. I mean, most people I knew were there, and yeah, like I said, it was cheap. I feel like the neighborhood was pretty mixed, but students tend to live closer to other students, and families lived closer to other families. I don't think they consider gentrification when they look for housing. I don't think you can realistically expect students to get involved with things like that. I mean, they're there in a city for 4 years and then they leave, so it's hard to get them invested in a community. And that's actually true of young professionals too. I mean, they're very mobile, so I think at least that's why they don't tend to get invested in much in their communities. You kind of have two competing models of communities, right? One that is like the traditional kind where people actually live in a community and, you know, are invested in it, and then the other where people just move wherever they want and don't really feel a sense of community with the people they live near.
As far as Brighton is concerned, I think it's more residential. So when you're from Brighton, it's a lot of people tend to stay in Brighton. You look at Alston as being really busy and really populated from September till about May or June. Then it's like a dead zone in July and August. Once September kicks in again, then we're like, oh, the students are back. So it's more, I want to say like a transient type of community than Brighton. Religion, or factors such as, you know, if your family has a home there and then you're raised there and then there's schooling that's in Brighton, there's businesses in Brighton. I'm not thinking that hardships connect us. I'm thinking it's more of positive experiences or familiar experiences or family experiences. A lot of people that used to live in Alston and Brighton, because the rents are so high or because they can't afford these awesome looking new places, you know, to live, that I feel a lot of people are going outside of the Alston and Brighton area.
I grew up here. I'm a lifelong resident of this community. I describe it as probably one of the most diverse communities in the city of Boston. The majority of the folks that are making the most noise with the gentrification are the folks that have lived here for so long. Yeah. They do not appreciate seeing, you know, beautiful Victorian houses torn down and 10-story high-rises put in their place. So gentrification has been happening the 70s when it really started, and it's been slowly building up. I think that there is a lot more than just what Harvard's building. I think that there are many, many developments, and I think some of them are cracking the foundation of our neighborhood that personally worry me. I see a lot of families that will just sell because they're being offered a lot of money. You want balance with development. You want to see more affordable housing units built in the community, or stop developing upscale, high residential housing. The neighborhood has to become more glued, which I think is happening.
So my name is Susie Kim, and I'm a Youth Programs Associate at Asian Community Development Corporation, otherwise known as ACDC or Asian CDC. So Asian CDC works in 3 large buckets. The first bucket is affordable housing. And the second thing we do is we have match savings programs. So it's like teaching you how to save money, how do you make good purchases, like how do you not run out of money, and then what are your resources. And then the last thing is community building, educating you about what's going on in your city. So what is your city planning to do with your neighborhood? The people we most serve or have the most immediate need usually are immigrant families coming to Chinatown. You know, Chinatown wasn't created out of like Asian people just being like, we just want to hang with each other. No, it was all always about safety. It was always about being protected. Especially with the political climate now in America, the message hasn't changed. Like, you don't belong here. This message you keep receiving ever since the Chinese Exclusion Act, when people wrote in the law that we don't want Chinese immigrants here, right? Till now, hotels and pushing out people who are already living in Chinatown who can't now afford these new prices and new places to live. The immediate need is like, if you're coming to the country, you don't have the language capacity, you might not have all the financial resources, and you might not feel safe. You're able to come somewhere where you can get those resources. We're providing a place for you to find community and build community. We have a lot of workshops in Cantonese and Mandarin, and then the youth programs, we generally serve second generation youth, so children of those immigrant parents, learning how to process your identity, like understand like what does it mean to be Asian in America. And certainly the location is key. I mean, if you think about transportation lines that are coming into the city, you got the silver line, you got the orange line, red line, green line, everything leads to Chinatown. All roads lead to Rome, all T's lead to Chinatown. It's right by the seaport, right by the financial district, right by downtown. For someone who's a young professional, it's almost like, oh, like I live in this nice high-rise building that overlooks half of the city, and then I can go downstairs and go to a cheap Asian restaurant and eat exotic fun foods. There's a draw to it. It is a hot spot, especially for development, because it's very expensive to buy land if it's privately owned. So Chinatown has still like small pockets of land that belong to the city that are hotspots. The types of services that are around here too, like the hospital, all of the daycares, workplaces, like things that are super close by, and tourist spots. Another thing that's been a big upset in Chinatown, like, is that it's a hotspot for Airbnb. The hospital is a need. You need a hospital, but the parts of the hospital that weren't a need are like the parking lots. This land itself was advocated for by the community, right? It was actually promised to the community for housing for residents, but the hospital then wanted to build a larger parking lot. And so the community was like outraged, and they advocated for this land to come back, and that's why this building is able to be here. So a lot of the times it changes, like big high-rise luxury buildings, and even some of the new businesses, you really have to think about like, who is this for? Is it for the people who are living here already? Or is it to draw people in? Because a lot of them are young professionals, a lot of them spend a lot more time outside of their home, and they're not in the community in the same way. So they might not even be spending money here. Maybe they're spending more money in the financial district, but they live here. They're taking up a home. Or tourist visitors who are like, oh, Boston's beautiful. I come and I contribute to the economy. Not understanding that the house that they're staying at, there was a family there. The great thing about Chinatown is that it's such a strong network of community organizations that are all fighting for the same thing, right? To protect and preserve Chinatown. There's an organization called the Chinese Progressive Association. They do a lot of organizing, rallying. Let's say you're a tenant and you get a notice that you're getting evicted. What CPA would do was help you through that legal process, help you understand what are your rights as a tenant. But let's say you lose your home. Right. Actually, a lot of folks who were pushed out of Chinatown, they're in Quincy and Malden now. So our services are now extending into Quincy and Malden. I think that Chinatown has a very strong network. It's like that word of mouth, where if one person knows I can get help here, like you're more prone to share it, right? Like, because especially if you're all feeling a threat together, you want to keep everyone safe in your community, then you would be more prone to share, right? So I think race and ethnicity definitely has to do with it. I don't think you can separate that, for sure. With your identity, you face like a very unique struggle in America, depending on what you look like. So I think that also means you have different health needs, and it's kind of like how Chinatown was created because we were looking for safety and peace and prosperity, right? And the struggle to maintain and protect it is because it's still threatened, right? So yeah, when you're under threat, you want to band together with the people you know are struggling the same way as you and protect each other. I would definitely say having a homogenous identity plays into it too. Gentrification as a word, concept, as a thing itself is not necessarily bad. Gentrification means change. What's the issue is if gentrification is not for the community. People who are coming into Chinatown not knowing what their impact is, like what kind of ripple effect they have, regardless of if you're moving here, playing here, living here, working here, not being aware that you're a community member then. Right, that you have to be aware you are. That's the biggest threat, is people not knowing the history and then their impact. It's a constant challenge to convince people to choose people over profit.
People over profit. The seemingly simple idea that nevertheless takes miles of effort for cities and corporations to overcome. Each of these neighborhoods, the Roxbury area, Allston, and Chinatown, experiences gentrification in a unique way with unique pressures and ways to combat the process. One factor that affects this, evidently, is the presence of a homogeneous culture. When people in a certain area come from the same background and share the same hardships and experiences, they will band together and become tightly knit and help each other and their neighborhood overcome threats like gentrification. We see this very strongly in places like Chinatown, where community organizations and the passion of emotionally connected residents empowers the neighborhood to fight, but less so in more racially diverse places like Mission Hill, Fenway, and Allston. Gentrification and development take many forms. It's very important to make a genuine effort to recognize whether an establishment really serves its community or draws in gentrifiers. No matter how gentrification plays out in a neighborhood, it is also important to recognize everyone's ability to make a difference. To young professionals and students moving into a gentrifying area, educate yourself about the culture and history of your community. Empower it. Enable it to be strong in fighting against harmful development. Common backgrounds bind us by experience. A common purpose binds us by passion and choice. As we fight for each other, we all become stronger.